I think it's fair to say my game week 32 bench boost didn't go quite to plan, so I'm going to take a look at my transfer plans going into double game week 33 and whether or not using a triple captain is still a good idea this week. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and I'm back with another video after taking a couple of days to collect my thoughts after what was a bit of a car crash game week. In terms of the bench boost at least, I'm actually on a green arrow up to 290k, but overall, I think it's fair to say it hasn't exactly gone to plan. And I'm fully aware that there's probably a few viewers that are tuning in just to see my misery. So this is what this section is. And then I'll go on to my transfer plans afterwards. I am able to laugh about it now, but I was pretty triggered at the time. So to quickly summarize the situation, I had one free transfer and I was looking at bench boosting. Ideally, I wanted to have a full bench of players playing at home with good fixtures. And I had 3 out of 4, but Clivert was the doubt. He had Fulham and was a risk in terms of fitness. Now, that match has actually now been and gone and he didn't play. So I think at the very least, I can take some comfort in the fact that I made a transfer there, but not so much the player I actually brought in. So looking at my bench in particular, it scored 7 points, which doesn't really tell the whole story. It's actually not as bad as some of the bench boosts I've seen out there this week. So if you got worse than that, I'm genuinely really sorry. It's been a horrible week for bench boost. It looked good on paper and it just hasn't panned out that way. Sometimes it happens, but at the very least, what I'm telling myself right now anyway, is that in a year's time, in 2 years' time, when we're looking back at previous bench boosts, it can't get any worse than this, right? So looking at mine, I had Verbruggen at home to Leicester. Now, Leicester hadn't scored in, I think, 7 Premier League games, which obviously meant they were going to score twice against Brighton, because why wouldn't they? So that was immediately quite frustrating. Followed, obviously, by Gvardiol. Now, that was actually the early kickoff, so I wasn't really expecting much from that anyway. But, of course, 1 pointer from him, conceded twice, didn't really do much, and didn't get any attacking returns. So that was the one I wasn't really expecting too much from. But the other two I definitely was expecting a bit more. Now, Milenkovic conceding in the very last minute of added time against Everton, wiping out the clean sheet, was the cherry on top of the absolute horror cake that was my game week 32 bench boost. But the main subject is, of course, Asensio. Now, I was weighing up which player to bring in. It could have been stick with Clivert, which would have got me 0. So I'm glad I made a transfer. The other option was to go for Rodgers, who looked like he might be a bit of a minutes risk in game week 32, but we all knew that he'd be a great player to own from game week 33 onwards because his minutes across the season have been very good. If he was going to get a rest, it seemed likely that the Southampton match was going to be the case. And I was a little bit scared off of him for that reason. And I went with Asensio, who looked in line to start and obviously had a good chance of taking penalties. Now, normally penalties are a good thing, but not when you miss 2 in one match. And I have to say, I don't remember a time that I've been more triggered by FPL. I wasn't watching the game live. I was actually at a friend's house. And when the first notification came in, I was like, you know what? It's just not worth looking anymore. I'm just going to annoy myself. And I tuned back in with about 10 minutes to go, and I'd seen that he missed a second penalty, and I was ready to throw my phone through a wall. It was absolutely horrific, but calm down a little bit. 2 penalty misses, and then an assist on the rebound from the penalty just saved a little bit of face there, and it now just looks like he blanked. 2-pointer from him. I think in terms of what I can learn from this, I already regret bringing him in, not because he missed the penalties, because that can happen. In fact, if I was to replay that game 100 times, I'd be really happy with him getting given 2 penalties. That's an exceptional circumstance. And if he'd scored even one of them, I'd be pretty happy with the result. What I'm annoyed at myself for is that I picked a player that I know later on through the season is going to be a minutes risk over a player that is safer and usually gets great minutes in Rodgers. Now, it's given me another move that I'll probably want to make later on, and an ongoing distraction in my starting 11, including in game week 33. So I think that's the mistake I made, was I was overplaying how important game week 32 was. I should have probably just gone with Rodgers, knowing that he was a risk, but that it probably saves a future transfer down the line. Now, obviously, 7 points is a pretty horrible result from a bench boost. I'd want 10 plus minimum. And although I'm on a green arrow, I was really hoping for a rank half in game week on a bench boost. And it's not turned out to be that way so far. I've still got 6 players to play, 3 Crystal Palace, 3 Newcastle, but they are playing each other. So the upside is somewhat limited there. And a lot of people already have the 6 from both sides. So I'm not expecting much more of a green arrow, but it might get a little bit better. But what it does mean is that I'm going to need to attack even harder for the last few game weeks if I'm to have any hope of getting a rank that I actually want at the end of the season, i.e. top 100k. It's not impossible. I'm still 45, 50 points outside of it, so it's looking unlikely. But I've got free hit, I've got triple captain, and if I use them in an aggressive way, I might be able to claw it back if I get a bit of fortune in the other game weeks. So I might have to go a bit differential at times. So if you're watching my future videos and you're thinking, why on earth is he even considering that? That's stupid. It's because I'm taking a risk. It's because I have to gamble if I'm going to get a respectable rank. And at the end of the day, I don't really care if I get 300k, 210k, or 500k. It's still not where I want to be. If I can get 100k, that's the goal. So I've got to swing for it. So 51 points, small green arrows so far. Double clean sheet wipeout for Arsenal as well, by the way, was annoying. And Mateta coming off after 45 minutes too is going to be something that we need to have a think about later on. But we're locked in for the rest of this game week either way. You've got Munoz, Sarr, and Mateta to play. I think Mateta will be okay, although he was taking off as a tactical thing by Glasner. I think he'll probably still play the next game. Not much we can do about it now, though. And Newcastle have been playing absolutely phenomenally. A quick word on Isak. Amazing assist to get the assist for the Tonali goal. Obviously, just 5 points from him so far in the first of the double game week. If you're on a triple captaincy for him, I think 5 points is not a great start, but it's still not nothing. And you've still got that second fixture. So if you can get a return or two in the second fixture, you might still be on for something pretty decent for a triple captaincy. Anything more than that, and it's a great usage of the chip. So I still don't think that you're in too much danger of a bad one with the triple captaincy. Hopefully you can get something for you against Crystal Palace. Murphy, brilliant yet again. And he's going to be a debate. I've got a section later on about Newcastle, whether or not we need to sell them moving forwards. But Murphy, at the price point he's at, considering the form he's in, I think only Isak and Salah have scored more since the start of December in terms of FPL returns, not just goals. So goals and assists, but in great form nonetheless. So whether or not to sell him is another question mark. But I've rambled on a little bit too long about my bench boost and the different players in my 15 in game week 32. Let's start looking ahead and figure out what the best strategies and best transfers to make for game week 33 and beyond might be. Right then, so I want to talk about Cole Palmer because I think it is now time to just get rid of him. I did experiment by keeping him on my wildcard, or actually rather bringing him back in on my wildcard, having sold him the week previous, thinking that the data was still good and he did have a good batch of 3 fixtures. Now, the problem is he was in poor form. He hasn't actually scored a goal now since game week 21, which is a ridiculous run for a player of his quality. And he's only got 3 assists in that stretch as well. So really poor form in terms of actual output. The data was still looking good, but it is now slowing down quite a lot. And given the fixtures have now run out, Ipswich being the last of the really good looking fixtures, it's unquestionably the right time to get rid of him. So I don't think we need to debate Cole Palmer. The big debate will be, which player do I want to bring in? And I'm sure a lot of you with Cole Palmer can probably relate. Now, I want to tackle Bukayo Saka first because he's the obvious replacement, right? 0.74 XGI per 90, Ipswich away, and then Crystal Palace at home in a double game week. And in theory, at least, because I've got my triple captaincy left to play, he could be a really nice option to use that on. I like triple captaining in midfielder because you've got that higher upside, or at least it feels like higher upside, with the potential of a clean sheet, potential of that extra point for the goal as well. And looking at the way that the season has been structured in terms of bonus points, midfielders who score goals seem to be doing really well on the bonus as well. So the upside is definitely there. if he gets the minutes. Now, I'm recording this on Tuesday during the daytime, so we haven't had the midweek Champions League games. Arsenal are 3-0 up against Real Madrid. Now, because they're going to the Bernabeu, you wouldn't put it past Real Madrid to pull something off, and Arteta and Arsenal will be taking it very, very, very seriously. So Saka will almost certainly start the game, but if they're in a relatively comfortable position, let's say they're drawing the game after 60, 70 minutes, would I be surprised if Saka got brought off? Not really. Considering Nwaneri has been playing well, considering he got brought off early in the first leg as well, it wouldn't shock me if he got brought off early in the second leg. If that does happen, I would be much more comfortable to be bringing him in game week 33, even though it's Ipswich away from home. Now, Arteta and Arsenal, again, they're not going to win the league this year. I think that's fairly clear now. They're too far back. But are they going to give up? Probably not. They're probably still going to go for it. They're probably going to try and win every game. And at some point, Saka's going to have to start regular matches. He's been back for a little while now. He started the Real Madrid match and got rested against Brentford. Obviously came off the bench for a little bit. But you'd imagine he's in line to start against Real Madrid. And then the big question mark will be, can he start back-to-back games against Ipswich? Now, I think there's a relatively good chance he does start the game. I still think he gets taken off early. But across the double game week, I think as long as he survives the Real Madrid game without an injury, I think we can be expecting roughly 120 to 150 minutes. Now, in my mind, that would be 60 to 70 minutes in the first game and probably around the same in the second. Now, that could obviously tilt a little bit, and it could be 30 to 45 in one and maybe 90 in the other. But I think across the double game week, we're looking at roughly 120 to 150 minutes as a maximum. If that is the case, I still don't think he's a bad option as a triple captain. Obviously, the upside's limited. You do want 180 minutes if you're looking at triple captaining him. And I think if you don't have him, even if you're not triple captaining next game week, he's still a great player to be bringing in. If he gets good minutes against Ipswich and Palace, it's a good double game week. The upside there, and he's obviously a very good FPL option, not just for now, but also for the remainder of the season as well. They've got game week 38 against Southampton. Right wingers have been feasting. So I've got a little side eye on that for the future for Saka as well. And given how much he was used prior to the injury, I think it is only a matter of time before the minutes become really good as well. But undoubtedly, there is a risk there on minutes. We'll have to wait and see what happens in the Real Madrid game. And maybe there's an argument that you could look elsewhere if you don't think he gets 2 starts against Ipswich and Palace, which, of course, there is some doubt there. So another one that snuck into the conversation, and I'm not going to lie, because I'm chasing rank and there's that little bit of romance in it, Kevin De Bruyne is quite tempting. He started the last 2. He's quoted as saying he's playing without pain for the first time in a while. And Everton Aston Villa in a double is not bad. It's not a terrible game week. It's also not amazing. It's not as good as Arsenal's, but it's still not bad. And Man City's attacking data has really started to take a bit of an uptick recently. Kevin De Bruyne has also been playing really well, especially against Crystal Palace in the most recent game. And Palace, as a bit of a case study, have been very defensively solid recently. Man City scored 5 goals against them. So they've definitely found their groove a little bit. They've not really got a lot much else going on. They're out of the Champions League. They do have the FA Cup to deal with, which I'll come on to. But Kevin De Bruyne is now back into their first choice starting 11, you would think. Foden's not really been a factor recently. De Bruyne is being played in that nice little pocket where we know he loves to operate, and he's creating a lot of chances for his forwards, obviously Marmoush and the wide players, and he's also shooting a fair bit as well. So the data this season, 0.59, is decent. It's nothing spectacular for a player of his price, but if he starts twice in the double, that could be a nice upside differential for me if I feel like Saka's minutes are going to be managed a little bit. Could I gain a little bit of an upside on De Bruyne, who's obviously not going to be owned by many players? I've only got double Man City as it stands anyway. Could I back him to get something big in the double? Well, as Andy Martin, if you do know him, will attest to, he definitely has upside in the double game week in seasons past. So is there a chance that I can pull off something spectacular in what is now his last season with Man City? Yes, I quite like the romance side of the whole punt there. But logically speaking, a bit like Saka, do I predict 2 starts? Do I predict 180 minutes? Probably not. I would assume he gets one start and maybe one bench appearance, especially because they've got the FA Cup game in game week 34. They obviously won't have the fixture there. I'm free hitting, so that doesn't really matter for me. But given they've got the FA Cup semi-final in the following weekend, could I see him getting reduced minutes in one of these two matches so he's ready for the semi-final? Yes, absolutely I can. So although I quite like it as a bit of a spicy differential, and to triple captain him especially would be glorious, but logically speaking, I'm not quite so confident that he gets the minutes that I would need for him to have the upside on a triple captaincy for me to want to take the punt. And a bit like Asensio, trying to learn from my mistakes last week so far, although I could change my mind, I am a little bit worried that if I buy him now in 2 or 3 game weeks time, I'll be looking at him in my side and think, well, that's an issue I need to deal with because he's not getting the minutes. So De Bruyne, I am tempted, but I think Saka probably takes precedent at the moment. The other two options that I am considering at least are Diaz and Mbeumo. Now, Mbeumo is more of a future move because although Brighton's not a bad fixture, it's certainly not as good as a double game week for Saka or for De Bruyne. But Mbeumo and Wissa and Brentford generally have great fixtures after I've free hitted in 34 from 35 through to the end of the season. Probably top of any ticker that you look at as well, in terms of the relevant teams at least. So Mbeumo is a player that I definitely want to buy very, very soon. And if I don't think Saka or De Bruyne are going to get great minutes in the double game week, then maybe I just make the move for Mbeumo now, take the fact that, okay, I don't have a double game week for him this week, but it's a transfer saved by the time I get to game week 35, when I'm definitely going to want him anyway. So Mbeumo is playing on my mind a little bit as someone that most people won't be buying this week, but it can save me a future move. It does mean I would miss out on a Saka though, which would really annoy me considering I'd plan my wildcard with this exact move, Palmer to Saka, in mind in game week 33. And of course, he's a good triple captaincy option. So it would probably mean that I don't use triple captaincy this week. Or if I did, it would have to be on someone like a Marmoush, who good 2 fixtures, but I don't think I want to necessarily use it on Marmoush over someone like Saka, who I think there is slightly more upside in if I can get the minutes right. That's not to say Marmoush is a bad option. I could have a look at it later on in the game week and maybe change my mind. His data is getting better. He should be on penalties and he's getting a lot of big chances. But in my heart of hearts, I think I wanted it to be Saka over Marmoush as a triple captaincy. So if I brought in Mbeumo, it would be a compromise. The other one is Diaz, who has returned, I think, in the last 6 game weeks now, very quietly, not being spoken about that much, but has a great fixture against Leicester. Now, although it's not a double game week, it's still a really good single game week fixture. And Salah, although he only has a single game week, will probably have over 100% effective ownership. So the only way I'm going to gain any benefit from what is a fantastic fixture against Leicester, who are conceding chances for fun at the moment, I would need to bring in another Liverpool player to get that benefit from that fixture. So Luis Diaz, with good attacking data, great output in terms of across the season, and a differential at this stage as well, could be a nice differential option for me to pick up ahead of someone like a Saka or a De Bruyne. But again, it all depends on whether I think they get the minutes. And as I mentioned, I do currently think at time of recording that Saka probably gets 120 minutes-ish, maybe up to 150, but it all depends on that Real Madrid game. I think De Bruyne is likely to get maybe 100 to 120, but is more of an issue down the line, whereas I think Saka's minutes probably increase. I think De Bruyne's probably long-term stabilize at around average 60 minutes a match, which might not be good enough if I want to have him until the end of the season. Saka's a little bit more reliable in that respect. Luis Diaz and Mbeumo, both decent single game week options, and Mbeumo would save me a future transfer. But again, I need to try and maybe work out a way to get to him in game week 35 that also allows me to accommodate Saka if I think he gets the minutes, which currently, as I mentioned, I think he does, and therefore I would want to triple captain him. So I wanted to have a quick word about the Newcastle assets and whether or not they're worth selling as we move towards the back end of the season. Now, obviously, a lot of us are tripled up on them or very close to because of the double game week in game week 32. But once that's out of the way, are they worth holding on to? And I think each of them have their own individual merits, but let's first have a look at the fixtures. Now, on paper, there's a lot of yellow there. There's one red. on the ticker, at least, when you look at the FPL website, it doesn't look great, especially if, like me, you're looking at free hitting in game week 34, which is the best fixture they've got left. Now, Ipswich at home, if you're free hitting that week, which of course I am in my situation, Ipswich is no longer relevant. So it's a batch of fixtures starting off with Aston Villa away from home, followed by Brighton, Chelsea, then Arsenal. And then you have to wait all the way till the end of the season for the next good-looking home fixture against Everton. Now, I think on paper they don't look great. But actually, if you look at each individual fixture, maybe barring the Arsenal one, I don't mind them at all. Now, Aston Villa away from home, not an easy fixture at all. But Aston Villa haven't kept many clean sheets this season. They will just be coming off the back of the PSG second leg as well, so might be a little bit tired. So is there a chance that they take their eye off the ball a little bit? Possibly. And also, let's not forget the team quality that Newcastle have. They are in sensational form at the moment. They're on a Champions League charge right now themselves. So are they going to take their foot off the gas when it comes to Aston Villa? Absolutely not. They're going to go at them full throttle yet again. So is Isak a good option against Aston Villa? In my personal view, yes. As long as he's fit, as long as he gets through that Crystal Palace match, I still think he's absolutely fine. Now, Murphy, maybe a slightly different matter because his data's not quite as good. He's not on penalties like Isak. He's not as talismanic. But he himself has been in fantastic form since the turn of the year. And although the data isn't as good as Isak's, 0.49 XGI per 90 for a player of his price is still very, very decent. So if you can find a way to have him as your 8th attacker maybe and hold him on your bench for some of the game weeks, I think that's absolutely fine. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that that is the ideal player to have on your bench most game weeks, because if injury strikes, you probably don't need a transfer for any of the other players, because as long as they're not a long-term injury, you could just bring Murphy in any of these fixtures and you've got a decent chance that he returns. Would you be surprised if Murphy returns against Aston Villa, Brighton or Chelsea? Absolutely not. All three defences are more than capable of conceding 2 or 3 goals to Newcastle. Murphy and Isak have got a great link up. He's got that right wing spot locked down at the moment, although in fairness, Gordon and Barnes both being fit might reduce his minutes a little bit, but I don't think I'd be that concerned about that considering the form he's in. It would be incredibly harsh to drop him. So I think Murphy continues in that spot. So Isak and Murphy, I don't think they're must-sells whatsoever. So moving on to the defence, I think is a very slightly different scenario. You don't have the same sort of upside as you do with a Murphy or an Isak. Livramento and Burns, attacking data isn't terrible, but you're not expecting attacking returns from them. If you get one, you're pretty happy. It's obviously fortunate, but you want the clean sheets. Now, whilst they look good from an attacking point of view, I do back Aston Villa, Brighton, Chelsea, Arsenal to probably, most of them at least, will score against Newcastle. Would I be surprised if they kept a clean sheet or two? Probably not. But could I accurately predict which ones they're going to come in, and therefore would I start them in those game weeks? Also, probably not. Because I've got a defence that outside of Newcastle assets I'm pretty happy with, Gvardiol, Saliba, Munoz as well. Am I going to be realistically starting a Livramento or a Dan Burn over any of those players in the back few fixtures? I would say it's relatively unlikely. But given that they are still cheap, do you have to get rid of them? Maybe not. Maybe you can hold them on your bench. Maybe they can also be a make weight for freeing up a little bit of money. Maybe you could buy an Agbadou at Wolves or something for 4 million, save 0.5, and it might allow you to make an upgrade elsewhere. But outside of that scenario, I think as long as you've got playing 3 defenders that you're relatively comfortable with, you probably could hold on to a Livramento or a Burn if you had to, because transfers at this point in the season are very, very important to maximize the upside for. And are there many other 4.5 to 5 million defenders that are going to gain you significant upside over not just Livramento or Burn, but starting them ahead of a Saliba or a Munoz or a Gvardiol or whoever you've got in your side starting most game weeks between now and the end of the season? I don't think there's many out there that would provide that significant upside. So for me, I think you could hold on to the Newcastle defenders. If they're in your starting 11 most game weeks, then maybe I'd look at moving them on because they're not easy fixtures for a clean sheet point of view. But Isak, I'd be more than happy to hold on to unless you need to free up the money and maybe attack fixtures with a Wissa come game week 35. That's something something that I'm in the back of my mind looking at. Or if you wanted to maybe back Watkins' minutes in game week 33 specifically and hope that he plays twice in the double game week, and therefore you could maybe drop Isak down to a Watkins. At time of recording, I'm not that convinced in that. If he doesn't start against PSG, that tells us two things. On one hand, maybe he will be rested and fully ready to play in game week 33 in the double. But it also potentially tells me that he's either not fit enough to start regularly, or he's not in Emery's preferred 11. So what does that tell us for the rest of the season? Maybe Watkins will be a little bit of a problem moving forwards. So Isak for me probably stays at time of recording, but don't rule out Watkins. Don't rule out downgrading him to a Wissa maybe in game week 35 if you needed to free up the money. But I still think he scores pretty decently between now and the end of the season. So I wouldn't rush to be selling either him or Murphy. Murphy especially if you can have him as your 8th attacker and hold him on the bench. Right, so here's how my team is currently set up without any transfers going into game week 33. I currently have a pretty good setup in terms of the doublers. I've got double Arsenal, double Man City. I've got triple Palace, who of course don't have a great double, but it's still a double nonetheless. And I've got one Aston Villa. So on paper, not looking too bad. I've got 3 single game week players, Palmer, Salah and Isak in my starting 11. Obviously no bench boost, so don't need to worry about the bench there. And ideally, I want to be using triple captain this week, if at all possible. But I'm not that convinced on using it on Marmoush at time of recording. So my transfer plans right now probably hinge on Palmer and who I want to replace him with. Ideally, it's going to be Saka, but let's wait and see what minutes he gets against Real Madrid. If I feel like he gets the minutes that I'm currently expecting him to, roughly 120, maybe up to 150 across the double, then I would be tempted to bring him in for Palmer and triple captain him. But I'm not ruling out just bringing him in, captaining him, and then holding off on the triple captaincy for later on, or maybe game week 36, where we think there's a good chance of a double game week from the FA Cup final, meaning that game week 37 fixtures might need moving forward to 36. So I'm maybe toying with the idea of bringing him in, maybe not triple captaining him and having that up my sleeve for one last hurrah towards the end of the season. But again, at time of recording, Saka in, triple captain him is definitely on the cards. And then there's a question mark as to whether or not I want to take a -4. Now, I'll probably hold on to Isak and Salah. I'm happy enough with the rest of my team, barring Asensio. Now, Asensio on paper might not be a bad option for game week 33. I did originally buy him in the thinking that he should get good minutes, not only in game week 32, but potentially game week 33 as well. But I am now a little bit concerned, not only because Rodgers' minutes are consistently high, but also because Asensio did miss 2 penalties. Is he going to drop down the pecking order in terms of the penalty takers from now on? Also, finally, because of the game state against PSG, would I be surprised if he gets a few more minutes against PSG as they try and attack the game and try and claw back some sort of result against them? Probably not surprised if he did. So Asensio, I am angry with him for missing 2 penalties. I don't want to make the decision just based on that. But I think if I'm using the logical side of my brain, which player would I want to hold on to from between now and the end of the season between Asensio and Rodgers? Definitely Rodgers. And do I think it's worth a -4 now across the rest of the season to have a Rodgers over an Asensio? I think that's the debate that I'm toying with. I'm currently coming down on the side of yes, and thinking that -4 now just to correct my mistake might not be the worst idea. I think hits will probably be flying around in game week 33 anyway, so maybe I'm a little bit shielded there. And having Rodgers would fill me with a lot more confidence, not only in game week 33, but also 35, 36, 37, 38, ahead of Asensio, where every single week now I'm going to look at him and think, is there a good chance that he's benched? Yeah, there is. So Asensio for me, it's a mistake. I probably shouldn't have gone there. If he'd scored even one of the 2 penalties, let alone both of them against Southampton, I would have said, fine, it was a great 1 or 2 week punt and it's worked. And now I probably do need to move him on come game week 35. But considering the game state of the PSG match and the fact that he's missed penalties, therefore making him less likely to take them in the future, it might not be a bad idea just to correct the mistake, admit that I was wrong and go for Rodgers now, just so that I'm sorted out and that I can use future transfers to attack upside elsewhere. Rodgers is boring. The data's not that great, but I back the quality of the player. The minutes are fantastic and he's getting better week on week at the moment. So I think that might be a move that I just make peace with. The only other alternative that I might be able to do here is if I bring in Saka quickly, I do have the money in the bank to do Palmer to Saka. It would give me that extra 0.2 million, and I could move Murphy across to Rodgers as my hit. Then I would probably have to start Rodgers ahead of someone else in my 11. It could be Isak away at Aston Villa. It could be Salah away at Leicester, the two only remaining single game weekers. But it also could be Asensio. So that might be another option to get rid of one of the Newcastle players and bring in Rodgers there. I'd have the exact money to do so. But the reason that I'm not thinking that that's the best idea is because it would leave me no money in the bank. And come game week 35, as I've hinted at, I do want to attack the Brentford players. Now, ideally, I don't want to get rid of Isak. So if I wanted to get rid of, let's say, a Mateta for a Wissa, I then wouldn't have the money to upgrade any of my midfielders bar Salah to Mbeumo. And that for me would be a little bit off-putting. So if I made that Murphy to Rodgers move now, it would give me a bit of a benching headache this week and put a double game weeker on my bench most likely in Asensio or someone like an Isak or a Salah who are fantastic single game week options. And it would also make future planning a little bit more difficult. Whereas if I got rid of Asensio, it frees up a little bit of money, it corrects a mistake in my 11, and it enables me the possibility of getting to the double Brentford in game week 35 if I wanted to, at the very latest, game week 36. So I'm currently thinking that it's Saka and possibly Rodgers for a -4. But let me know in the comments below what you think of that, whether or not maybe I should just do Saka and leave Asensio, and maybe then the hit doesn't pay off across the next few game weeks, and Asensio could become someone like an Mbeumo in game week 35, and I just avoid Villa altogether. Quickly before I wrap up, because I am close to wrapping up, the other reason I want to hold on to at least a Villa player is because they've got the chance of the double game week in 36 if they win their FA Cup semi-final against Palace. So I don't want to completely get rid of Aston Villa too quickly on the off chance that they do have that double game week. So having Rodgers would maybe solve that problem as well. And that's why at least it is tempting to move Murphy to Rodgers rather than Asensio to Rodgers, because then I could have two double game week players rather than one come game week 36 if they were to progress. So a lot of moving parts there. I think I'm most likely to do the -4 for Asensio to Rodgers alongside Saka. But let me know, like I said in the comments below, if you think I'm missing something or if you think that the -4 just isn't worth doing, because I would completely understand. Now, as we wrap up today's video, if you've enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe, especially if you've enjoyed laughing at my pain, given the bench boost failure in game week 32. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and give it a subscribe. And of course, as always, if you've got any questions at all, please do let me know in the comments below, and I'll try and get back to you before we hit the game week 33 deadline.